Welcome to the Traders Network. I'm Michael Yorba, your host. Thanks for joining us. We're also streaming to you from yorbamedia.com, broadcasting from the Dallas KFXR 1190 AM Clear Channel studios. And if you care to use your phone to listen to the show, the iHeart app. All right, my first guest today is Thijs Spoor. He is the chairman of the board and CEO of a absolute breakthrough company, FluoroPharma Medical Inc. But what these people do is develop breakthrough molecular imaging agents for positron emissions tomography. Believe me, I'm not going to even try and explain more what they do. Thijs, welcome to the show. Thanks for showing up.
Great. No, thank you so much for having me on the show.
My pleasure. Let's back up just a little bit. You have your stock symbol is FPMI, Frank Paul Mary Interest, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Let me back up a little bit and give you a chance to embellish your background in the industry, and then please tell us more about your company.
Sure. So I'm a nuclear pharmacist by training, which is there's not a lot of us out there, but basically I specialized in medicines and drugs in college, and then did a further specialization in imaging and in nuclear cardiology specifically. I actually ended up working for a company called Amersham, which was the world's largest producer of medical imaging isotopes. They got bought up by GE Healthcare back in 2003. And I used to run their nuclear cardiology portfolios, and I'll explain what that business is in a little bit. And then from there, I went on to actually looking at companies to acquire in this space for PET imaging, optical imaging, and oncology. So I spent my entire career in medical imaging and looking at things. I left the GE for a little while and went to Wall Street, was a sell-side analyst at JP Morgan and Credit Suisse, and then decided I really couldn't help myself but go back and help build and grow developing companies. So I got the call to join FluoroPharma and was really excited by the platform technology and what's there. You know, I'd like to say this is the largest market that no one's ever heard of, and it really is right now. It's a billion-dollar market that people aren't really aware is out there. You know, if you look at what we do cardiac stress tests. We try and make those better. So we don't do the equipment. We don't provide software. What we do is provide the new tracers that doctors hopefully will use in order to get high-res pictures of the heart.
I'm looking at the pictures you put up on your social network page on our website. What am I looking at?
So what you're looking at there is the heart that's beating. And so you think to yourself, you know, we all have a heart. Heart disease is huge. You know, the single greatest cause of death is still cardiovascular disease. And when we know everyone has a heart. We can look at some patients walking down the street and think, gosh, you know, that person probably has heart problems. You look at some young athletes and say they're probably fine. But the doctors need to get more information than that to really figure out what to do with treatment. So they actually have ways to visualize what's inside your body. And we say we make the invisible visible. What we do is we can actually peer inside the body and look to see what's happening. So what you're looking at those images there is you're looking at various cross-sections or slices through the heart and visualizing it while it's beating to actually look to see which parts of the tissue are healthy and which parts are not healthy.
I can see that. Okay, I can see why that'd be a massive breakthrough for technology. You say it's the biggest market that nobody's ever heard of. Tell us where you fit in that market. What are you at the forefront, pioneer? I mean, where are you there?
Sure. So in terms of where the market is going, I mean, I'm going to make a prediction out there and say that this is really going to be the decade of PET imaging. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably helpful for people to understand what that is. I mean, we all know what X-rays and CT are, and that's where you get a sort of anatomical scan of the body. MRI does a similar thing, but again, it looks at anatomy. It doesn't look at physiology or function. And the joke in the medical community is that you can take a dead person in a CT scan, and the doctor can't actually tell if that person is alive or dead, whereas we're the exact opposite. We only look at how well is the body functioning, and we can look to see on a very personal level what's happening inside the body. Now, in terms of SPECT versus PET, it's a very technical way of saying it, but basically you're going from low resolution to high resolution. So if I were to really simplify things down, I'd say we provide HD images of the heart, and we're trying to get people off of sort of low res, almost black and white kind of images into a much higher resolution version of imaging.
The way you say that, I sense that you're trying to drag them into the 21st century, and they're kicking and screaming about that. What is the issue? Why are not more people using this technology if it's so much better to use for? They can't tell if it's a live person, a dead person. All of a sudden, you show them something that can actually give them an edge on what's the holdup with the industry.
So X-ray and CT, again, are just anatomy,
Right.
and then we're getting into functional imaging, and there's two kinds of functional imaging. The holdup is really that the drugs are approved by the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
So this is it's something that's injected in the patient's bloodstream. It's considered non-invasive, but it's a bit of a drug that gets injected, and that means the FDA has oversight in terms of what happens. So if you're going for a medical scan, whenever they inject that dye into you, that dye is regulated like a drug by the FDA, and the FDA's job is to make sure that things are safe and effective. So if we look at the landscape right now for imaging now, there's about 12 million studies done every year using the low-res version of these dyes for heart images. But in cancer care, doctors have switched to the high-res images already. And so you've got these beautiful high-resolution images that are standard of care now in patients who have cancer that use these modern PET scanners. And then recently, you've had several approvals come through the FDA for high-resolution PET images in the brain for Alzheimer's disease patients. And these are products that are now being sold by Eli Lilly, GE Healthcare, and Piramal. And so the next frontier should really be cardiology. There is a limited way to do PET cardiology right now, but the doctors really want an easy-to-use way to get HD images of the heart. And what they're waiting on is for companies like ours to actually get a drug through FDA.
Okay, so we still have that hurdle to go through.
Correct. So we're in phase 2 right now.
Okay, all right. I'm on your website. I'm looking at 4 different products you have: CardioPET, BF PET, VasoPET, and AZ PET. Give us we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in the segment. Give us a high level look at what these different products do.
Sure. So CardioPET, it's a fatty acid, and what it does is it basically finds any cell in the body that's hungry for fatty acid that burns out of its main source of energy, and that actually ends up being the heart. So this finds which cells in the heart are most hungry for fatty acid, and therefore are they the most alive, and versus damaged cells. BF PET, the BF stands for blood flow, and this is a separate tracer, totally different compound, that's supposed to go through and actually show where is there blood flow in the heart. So the classic cardiac stress test where they put you in a treadmill and inject the dye, that's where that one fits in, and we actually should make it high-res. VasoPET we're developing for something called vulnerable plaque, and this is a situation where if a patient sort of drops dead of a massive heart attack that you see in the headlines, that's usually a vulnerable plaque rupture, and that's one that we think we can image non-invasively. And the last one in the pipeline is coming called AZ PET, which is being developed for Alzheimer's disease, but it's very, very early on. So I think it's more important for investors to focus on the late-stage compounds.
Okay. All right. Let's do this. We've got a minute or so left in the segment. You have events or anything of that nature where our audience could participate, and I'd love to get some contact information for you, and then we'll cover the rest of the things that we need to talk about on the other segment. How can our audience reach out to you?
Sure. So the best way for us to be found is our website, www.fluoropharma.com, and that's FLUOROPHARMA. And we also respond to emails to info@fluoropharma.com.
And symbol FPMI.
That's correct, FPMI.
All right, that sounds good. All right, let's take a break right now, Thijs, and we'll come back and talk about a bunch more stuff on the other side of the break, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back with Thijs Spoor, CEO, FluoroPharma.com. And don't forget the symbol FPMI, and special thanks to Monk Media and 1-800-PublicRelations.com for all their PR and media support. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Traders Network. I'm Michael Yorba, your host. Thanks for joining us. Broadcasting to you from the Dallas KFXR 1190 AM Clear Tunnel Studios, streaming on yorbamedia.com and through the iHeart app. I've got John Thijs Spoor, CEO of FluoroPharma Medical, on the show with me today. Breakthrough information coming through here. All right, Thijs, let's back up just a little bit here and tell me more about the technology. I mean, we just went through in the last segment some of the products that you have, but it seems to me that from what I'm hearing, and I'm not in your field, but it seems to me that what we're talking about is stuff that's just a little bit ahead of the curve for most people. How far out before the rest of the pack tries to catch up on what you're doing?
So we're ahead of the curve because our products come from an inventor who's a repeat inventor in the space who keeps inventing new molecules. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing to do is find a drug or tracer that goes to the heart but doesn't go to the liver. So the heart and liver sit right next to each other inside your body, which means that anything that you're trying to do in order to get rid of background, you have to go just the heart and not the liver. And the liver's job is to take drugs or tracers out of the blood, and so you need to design the drug to sneak past the liver and get to the heart. So I think a lot of people would like to be in our space, but it's so hard to actually get something even here. And the reason why people really want to get something here is it's a huge market, but also the clinical value of actually going from low-res to high-res is pretty meaningful in patients' lives right now. And any sort of company-sponsored trial with the FDA, the low-res test is about 70% accurate. And looking at the technology platform we're developing, it should go up to about 85% accuracy, just going from low-res to high-res. And that's a meaningful change in patients and where things are going.
Well, one of the things in reading some of the information that I have on you that I noticed is that you actually have the ability to catch things far earlier than they normally can be caught right now. So almost to the point of preventative medicine. Bring that out for me.
Sure. So I mean, we all have disease at various levels in our body, and any sort of physical change that you're going to get is going to be preceded by chemical change. The reality is that our bodies are chemistry sets, and really, it's going. Any little chemical changes that start to take place eventually get worse and worse till eventually you get something physical that happens. And so we pick up those really subtle early chemical signals because we watch to see how the body responds to a tracer we put in the bloodstream, and we can see really, really early disease in very fine, high resolution, to give doctors meaningful information so that they know early enough. Do they change the patient's medicine? Do they do some surgery? Do they put a stent in? It's all those things about the earliest information possible to make the best possible treatment choices.
Okay, let me make sure I got that clear. You have the ability to detect diseases earlier than anybody else.
Well, we can certainly detect it on much higher resolution. So we don't have the data to say earlier yet. But what we can do is say with much sharper, crisper images, where is the disease? In fact, on the low-res scans, some of those patients get called as being healthy when in fact they're actually unhealthy and should have had treatment. And flip the other way, sometimes patients are actually called to have disease when they're actually normal, and what that means they go for unnecessary procedures. So it's actually on both ends of the spectrum where if we can get things more accurate, then we're actually only doing things to patients that need it and doing it earlier as well.
Okay, and does that go for all the products, Vaso, BF? Because I think right now what we're doing is we're talking about cardio.
We're mostly talking about CardioPET and BF PET right now. That's where we have the most human data. VasoPET and AZPET are still in the animal testing stage. But with BF PET and CardioPET, we have a pretty clear sense that we're getting really high-res images, very detailed pictures of the heart. And one of those images I post on my blog is you can see as the heart is beating there, areas where there's perfusion versus areas where there's no really viable tissue at all. And that tells the doctor what to do next in that patient.
Tell me about the testing with on the human trials. How long have you been testing? And I'd like you to bring out what you can about the results of the testing. I know that we've got an overview, but I want to give the audience a feel for what the in-depthness of the research that's already taken place.
Sure. So we've done extensive phase 1 testing on the BF PET compound at Massachusetts General Hospital, and we've press released that we are about to start the phase 2 trial there in patients as well with the BF PET for perfusion imaging. With CardioPET, we did phase 1 testing at Mass General, and now we're branching out. We have a trial that's getting ready to finish over in Europe, where we're testing in patients in Belgium. We've seen some initial results, and actually some were actually just presented a few weeks ago at the Society of Nuclear Medicine midwinter meeting, where the physicians found very clear images early on and consistent across all their patients, and no issues with safety whatsoever. So the first glimpse on that trial that's been released is showing that the drug has had no side effects, and it's given very, very clear images very early on.
It seems like the next step through the trials should be pretty easy from what you just told me.
So the next steps are fairly straightforward. We need to give the FDA what they want to see, which is how does our drug work, how's the gold standard work, and now we need to sort of just grind through and get all the patients done.
How is the drug administered?
So the drug's a small intravenous injection, so it's about 1 milliliter of liquid, and it gets put into the vein. And it's a lot of people who have a stress test and get the dye, they'll know it's literally about 1 milliliter that gets injected into the patient.
Okay, so there's no change in the normal stuff.
Correct.
All right. Let's do this. Let's shift gears. I think we've kind of exhausted all of the technology here to bring it out, unless there's something else you want to tell the audience before we go into...
No, I think we've captured it. We're basically going from low res to high res. And actually, one thing I didn't mention is that by actually going to high resolution, we actually think we can lower the radiation dose of the patient by 2/3. So we're hoping to provide a sort of a safer product out to the market.
That's a big plus. A big plus. I happen to have a little experience of that for this last year with a very close personal pal of mine. All right, let's talk about the business of your company, because that is also your background. You know, where you came from, that side of the world. Tell me about FluoroPharma as a business, where you're going through. Obviously, you know your boundaries of where you can't go, but I want to at least open that up so that you can tell our investors that are listening to the show, you know, what it looks like here, what you can tell them.
Sure. So we're developing these agents for commercialization. We expect to commercialize extensively in the U.S. and Europe. Mm-hmm. We would expect to do partnering deals in some of the other countries around the world, because of that's not our core area. Mm-hmm. But we know when we launch a product, we launch products that should have about a 60% gross margin, and we know that we're launching into currently $1 billion market in the U.S. that's growing to about a $2 billion market once these higher resolution images come forward.
Whoa. So that tells me right away, and maybe I got this wrong, but I want you to correct me if I do, you're about to put that industry on its ear. That is big numbers you just mentioned.
They are, and it's why I say it's the largest market no one's ever heard of. I mean, right now you have some similar comparison transactions in the space. Eli Lilly bought a company called Avid Pharmaceuticals for $300 million in cash and $500 million in earnouts when they were in their phase 3 program. We're trying to finish off our phase 2s right now. You have other products out there that are all sitting in that sort of billion range. When you've got 12 million procedures and such a clear unmet medical need, it turns into a pretty enormous market potential.
All right. Let's, we've already been in, I guess, in a way, covering some of the, 2013 milestones. Any achievements that you want to talk about going forward? I know phase 3 trials is definitely paramount, but are there any other things that you would like to bring out about the business side, that goals, objectives, things that you think an investor, institutional or accredited investors listening to the show would really like to know?
So we expect to finish off our CardioPET phase 2 trial in Belgium shortly. We also expect to start imaging patients on our BFPET trial shortly. We're always evaluating sort of new opportunities in markets and ways to develop these products. Mm-hmm. And also we're talking with potential partners to really see who's interested in which countries around the world to take these products forward. And then we certainly know that we're getting great data. The nice thing about the data, too, is that over the next year, as the physicians who are doing these trials get the chance to publish and present their information, then the key data will become available to the investing public.
Okay. All right. What else would you like to tell us about your company? Because I'm really off my mark with your industry. So I quite frankly, don't know what else to ask you, and I want to defer to you. What else would you talk to if you were in a room full of investors in New York at Goldman's?
Sure. So I would encourage people to really think about healthcare. And the way healthcare is going is that we have to do things better, we have to do things safer, and we have to do things that are going to make economic sense. And we think that our technology platform allows physicians to get higher quality images with lower radiation dose, and by avoiding unnecessary testing, it really is going to make a difference to the healthcare system from a cost perspective. One of the big drivers out there for healthcare is appropriate use and cost effectiveness. So if you can go into a hospital system and tell a physician that we can help really get rid of unnecessary angiograms, or we can only send patients down the right path, they get pretty excited about that because we all know healthcare is a big nut, and we all want to spend the money on ourselves if it's worth it. But we also don't want to spend unnecessary money on things that don't make sense. And that's what we're trying to really do by making the test more accurate and bringing more actionable information. The docs are only doing the tests they need to do next and only giving treatments that they think will work.
You mentioned cost reduction. Give me a ballpark idea. What do you think what kind of impact do you think that's going to have?
Well, there's been some data out there that shows that if you go from low res to high res, you decrease your normal patients that go in for angiography. And angiography costs range from, sort of $7,000 to $21,000 depending on the hospital you're at. So having a slightly more expensive, higher resolution test up front, if you can save one patient from getting an unnecessary, catheterization procedure because they're normal and they don't need it, that adds up into the system for really turning into dollars.
Okay, good answer. All right, before we go, contact information one more time for you so our audience can reach out to you.
Sure. So I can be emailed at info@fluoropharma.com. That's FLUOROPHARMA.
And FPMI for the stock symbol, right?
That's correct.
All right. Thijs, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate this.
Michael, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. All right, Johan Thijs Spoor, CEO, FluoroPharma Medical, FluoroPharma.com. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to Monk Media and 1-800 Public Relations for all their PR and media support. And on the other side, we'll be right back with, let's see here, Trey and Vince. We're going to talk about some entrepreneurial ideas that these gentlemen have brought to the table. And I also want to send a special thank you out to everybody who's sent us all the wonderful information, questions, guest requests, and topic requests. Please keep them coming. YorbaMedia.com is where you need to reply to us. And we'll be sure to follow up and get every piece of information on the show that we can. Thank you. We'll be right back.